I never thought my life would be turned upside down by a woman named Brenda who wielded her HOA clipboard like a weapon. But here I was, standing in the middle of a blizzard in Colorado Springs, watching my van disappear down the snowy street with my 12-year-old daughter still inside. Let me back up. My name is Zachary Irving, and 3 months ago, I moved into the Meadowbrook Heights community with my daughter Julia. It seemed like the perfect place to start over after my divorce. The neighborhood had good schools, safe streets, and houses that actually looked maintained. What I didn't realize was that the homeowners association ran this place like a military compound. And Brenda Patterson, the HOA president, treated every minor infraction like a personal assault on her vision of suburban perfection. Julia has cerebral palsy. She uses a wheelchair and needs assistance with most daily activities. The van I bought specifically for her has a wheelchair lift and enough space for her medical equipment. It's not the prettiest vehicle, I'll admit. It's a 12-year-old conversion van with some rust spots and a faded paint job, but it's reliable and it's what I could afford after the divorce cleaned out my savings. The problems started almost immediately after we moved in. Brenda showed up at my door on our second day in the neighborhood, holding her ever-present tablet and wearing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She was probably in her late 40s, with that specific haircut that seemed to be issued to every HOA president in America, somewhere between a bob and whatever you'd call a style that screams, "I need to speak to your manager." "Welcome to Meadowbrook Heights," she said, her voice dripping with false cheeriness. "I'm Brenda Patterson, HOA president. I wanted to personally deliver your copy of our community guidelines and covenants." She handed me a binder that had to be 3 inches thick. I flipped through it, seeing page after page of rules about everything from fence heights to approved exterior paint colors to where you could park your vehicles. "That's quite comprehensive," I said, trying to keep my own tone friendly. "We maintain high standards here," Brenda replied. "I noticed your van parked in the driveway. Per Section 12, Paragraph 4, all vehicles must be parked in garages overnight. Driveways are for temporary parking only." I glanced back at my driveway where the van sat. The garage is full of unpacked boxes right now. "I'll move it once I get everything sorted." Her smile tightened. "The rules don't have exceptions for moving in, Mr. Irving. You have until tomorrow night to comply, or you'll receive your first violation notice." That should have been my first warning sign, but I was too exhausted from the move and too focused on getting Julia settled to pay attention to the red flags. I spent the next day unpacking just enough to squeeze the van into the garage at night, even though it meant Julia and I had to navigate around towers of boxes every time we needed to get in or out. But the van situation was just the beginning. Over the next few weeks, Brenda found something to complain about almost daily. My grass was a 1/4 inch too long. I had put my trash cans out 12 hours before the approved time. The Christmas wreath I hung on my door wasn't on the pre-approved list of decorations. Each violation came with a $50 fine that I couldn't afford. I tried to stay compliant. I really did. I mowed the lawn twice a week, even though it was barely growing in the cold weather. I set alarms to remind me of when to put out trash cans. I took down the wreath and replaced it with one from Brenda's approved list, even though Julia loved the original one because it had silver bells that chimed in the wind. The situation came to a head on a Tuesday in late January. Colorado had been hit with a massive winter storm system that the Weather Service had been warning about for days. Schools closed early, and I left work at noon to pick up Julia. The snow was already falling heavily by the time we got home, those big fat flakes that look pretty but accumulate fast. Julia had a physical therapy appointment that afternoon that we had to cancel. She was disappointed because she had been making good progress and looked forward to her sessions with her therapist, Monica. To cheer her up, I promised we'd have a movie marathon in the van. It was a thing we did sometimes. The van had a small TV installed in the back, and Julia loved sitting in her wheelchair in the cargo area, wrapped in blankets, watching her favorite shows while I sat in the driver's seat working on my laptop. "Can we watch the new season of that baking show?" Julia asked as I activated the wheelchair lift. "Absolutely. I'll make hot chocolate too." I got her settled in the back with a pile of blankets, her tablet, and her favorite stuffed elephant that she'd had since she was 3. The van was parked in my driveway because I needed to unload some medical supplies I'd picked up from the pharmacy, and I hadn't pulled it back into the garage yet. The snow was really coming down now, already covering the windshield in a white blanket. "I'm going to run inside and make that hot chocolate," I told Julia. "You good for 5 minutes?" "I'm fine, Dad. Can you bring the cookies too, the chocolate chip ones?" "You got it, sweetheart." I headed inside, shaking snow off my coat. The house was warm, and I could hear the wind starting to howl outside. This was going to be a bad storm. I busied myself in the kitchen, heating milk on the stove for proper hot chocolate, not that instant packet stuff. Julia deserved the real thing. I was stirring cocoa powder into the steaming milk when my phone buzzed. I glanced at it and saw an email from Brenda with the subject line, "Urgent violation." My stomach sank even before I opened it. "Mr. Irving, your commercial vehicle has been parked in your driveway for 48 minutes. Per Section 12, Paragraph 4, Subsection B, commercial vehicles are not permitted to be parked in driveways at any time. Your van has been classified as a commercial vehicle due to its size and cargo capacity. You have 15 minutes to move it before I authorize a tow. Regards, Brenda Patterson, HOA President." I stared at my phone in disbelief. Commercial vehicle. It was a converted van for my disabled daughter, and she was giving me 15 minutes during a blizzard. I quickly typed out a response explaining that I would move it as soon as I brought Julia inside, but before I could hit send, I heard a diesel engine outside. My blood ran cold. I dropped my phone on the counter and ran to the front door, flinging it open just in time to see a massive tow truck backing up to my van. Brenda stood on the sidewalk under a large umbrella, directing the driver with sharp hand gestures. "Stop!" I yelled, running out into the snow without even grabbing my coat. "My daughter is in that van." The wind carried my words away. The snow was falling so thick I could barely see 20 feet in front of me. I sprinted toward the van, my shoes slipping on the rapidly accumulating snow, but the tow truck driver was already lifting the front wheels off the ground. "My daughter!" I screamed again, finally reaching Brenda. "My daughter is inside the van." Brenda looked at me with that same cold smile. "You should have thought about that before violating HOA regulations. You were warned, Mr. Irving. The van will be held at Morrison's Towing on the east side. You can retrieve it after you pay the towing fee and your outstanding HOA fines." "Are you insane?" "My 12-year-old disabled daughter is inside that van." I tried to run past her to the tow truck, but she actually grabbed my arm. "If you continue to harass me, I'll call the police for assault," she said calmly. I yanked my arm away and ran to the tow truck, banging on the driver's side door. The driver, a heavy-set man in his 50s, rolled down his window looking annoyed. "My daughter is in the back of that van. She's disabled and in a wheelchair. You need to put it down right now." He looked uncertain for the first time, glancing back at Brenda. "Lady, you didn't say nothing about a kid in there." "He's lying to avoid the tow," Brenda called out. I've been watching his house. Nobody is in that van. I'm not lying. Julia, Julia, baby, can you hear me? I ran around to the back of the van, trying the doors, but they were locked. The windows were completely covered in snow. Julia! The driver was already pulling away, my van hooked to his truck. I ran after them, screaming Julia's name, my phone forgotten in the house, my inadequate shoes filling with snow. The tow truck turned the corner at the end of the street and disappeared into the white curtain of the storm. I stood there in the middle of the street, snow falling all around me, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might explode. My daughter was in that van. My disabled daughter, who couldn't get out by herself, who needed help with everything, was being towed away in a blizzard by a stranger to some impound lot across town. I ran back to my house, nearly falling twice on the slick driveway. Brenda was still standing there, typing something on her tablet like she hadn't just authorized the kidnapping of my child. "You're going to regret this," I said, my voice shaking with rage and fear. "Is that a threat, Mr. Irving? Because I can add harassment to your growing list of violations." I didn't have time to deal with her. I burst through my front door and grabbed my phone, my hands shaking so badly I could barely unlock it. I dialed Julia's cell phone, praying she had it with her. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. "No, no, no," I muttered, trying again. Same result. I called 911, my words tumbling out in a panicked rush. "My daughter was just towed away in my van. She's 12, she's disabled, she's in a wheelchair. She's alone in a van being towed in this storm." "Sir, slow down," the dispatcher said. "Your daughter was in a van that was towed." Yes, the HOA authorized a tow and my daughter Julia was inside waiting for me. She has cerebral palsy. She can't get out by herself. She's being taken to Morrison's towing on the east side. "I'm dispatching officers now, sir. What's your name and address?" I gave her all the information, my eyes on the window watching the snow pile up. Every second that passed was a second Julia was alone and probably terrified. "Officers are en route to the tow company location. Sir, I need you to stay at your residence." "Do you know if your daughter has a phone with her?" "She does, but she's not answering. She might have her headphones on watching a show. She does that. Oh God, she's going to be so scared when she realizes what's happening." "The officers will find her, sir." "Can you give me a description of the vehicle and your daughter?" I rattled off the details, my mind racing. How long would it take for the cops to get there? How long had Julia already been gone? 10 minutes? 15? The tow yard was at least 30 minutes away in good weather. In this storm, it could take an hour. I couldn't wait. I grabbed my car keys, pulled on a coat, and headed back out into the storm. My Civic was in the garage, and I backed it out into what was now nearly 3 inches of fresh snow. The streets were barely visible, and my small car struggled for traction even backing down the driveway. Driving in those conditions was nightmare fuel. I couldn't see more than a few feet ahead, the windshield wipers working overtime and barely keeping up with the snow. Other cars crawled along at 15 miles per hour when they were on the road at all. Most people had the sense to stay home. I white-knuckled the steering wheel, following the GPS directions to Morrison's towing on my phone mounted to the dashboard. 20 minutes into the drive, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, but I answered immediately, hoping it was Julia. "Mr. Irving." An official-sounding voice came through. "Yes, did you find my daughter?" "This is Officer Ryan Chen with Colorado Springs PD. I'm at Morrison's towing now. The tow truck hasn't arrived yet." "The conditions are extremely poor. It's possible the driver pulled over to wait out the worst of the storm." "He has my daughter in the van he's towing," I said, my voice cracking. "She has cerebral palsy. She's only 12. She needs her medication at specific times. She's probably terrified. We're working on reaching the tow truck driver. The company says he's not responding to their calls, which likely means he's pulled over and shut down to wait out the storm. That's actually protocol in these conditions. Your daughter is probably safer with him waiting than trying to drive through this. She doesn't know what's happening. She was just sitting in the van watching TV, and now she's being hauled through a blizzard. I understand, Mr. Irving. We have units trying to locate the truck along the expected route. Are you driving right now? Sir, I need to advise you to pull over. The roads are getting too dangerous. I'm not pulling over until I find my daughter. Mr. Irving, I understand your concern, but you won't be any help to your daughter if you slide off the road. Please find a safe place to wait. We will find her. I knew he was right, but everything in me screamed to keep driving. I had to get to Julia. I was her father. I was supposed to protect her, and I'd let her be towed away like a piece of property because of some power-hungry HOA president with a grudge. The roads kept getting worse. My Civic, which wasn't exactly built for Colorado winters despite my winter tires, was sliding with every turn. I passed 2 accidents already. Cars spun out in ditches. My hands ached from gripping the steering wheel so tightly my phone rang again. This time it was Julia's number. I nearly dropped the phone trying to answer it. Julia, baby, are you okay? Dad. Her voice was small and scared. Dad, where are you? Why is the van moving? Relief crashed over me so intensely I had to pull over. I'm coming to get you, sweetheart. There was a mix-up. The van got towed, but you're going to be fine. Is the driver with you? No, I'm still in the back. Dad, I'm scared. Why did someone tow the van with me inside? Where are we going? I could hear the tears in her voice and it broke my heart. I know, baby. I know you're scared. This is not your fault at all. This is a mistake, a really bad mistake. I need you to try to get the driver's attention. Can you reach the front of the van? I don't know. Maybe. My wheelchair is locked in place. Okay, try honking the horn. There's the emergency horn button on the panel near you. Remember I showed you, the red button? I heard rustling and then a horn blaring through the phone. It went on for several seconds. Good job, Julia. Keep pressing it. Dad, we're stopping. The van is stopping. That's good. That's really good. The driver is probably coming back to check on you. When he opens the door, tell him you need to call 911, okay? Tell him your dad is coming to get you. I heard muffled voices through the phone, then Julia said, he says he didn't know I was in here. He's really surprised. He's calling his boss. Let me talk to him, sweetheart. There was more rustling, then a man's gruff voice came on. This is Dale Freeman. Sir, I had no idea your daughter was in this vehicle. The HOA told me it was an abandoned commercial van. I've got my hazards on, pulled off Highway 24. I'm not moving another inch with a child in tow. The police have already called me twice. Thank you, I said, my voice shaking. Thank you for stopping. Is she okay? Can you check on her? She seems okay, just scared. Hold on. I heard him talking to Julia, his voice much gentler now. She's bundled up good back here. She says she needs her medicine soon, though. She takes anti-seizure medication at 6 p.m. It's in her backpack, a purple backpack that should be in the back with her. More rustling. Got it. There's a bottle here. Says to take 1 tablet. Yes, that's it. She needs water with it. I've got water in my truck. I'll get her sorted. Sir, where are you? I'm on Highway 24 heading east. Where exactly are you? He gave me a mile marker. I was about 10 minutes away. I'm coming right now. Please stay with her. I'm not going anywhere. I'm calling my dispatcher to tell them we're staying put until you arrive. This storm is getting worse anyway. No way I'm towing anything else in this. I pulled back onto the highway, driving as fast as I dared, which wasn't very fast at all. The snow was relentless, and visibility was down to almost nothing. I passed the accidents I'd seen earlier, now with ambulances and fire trucks on scene, their lights barely visible through the white. When I finally saw the tow truck's hazard lights flashing through the storm, I nearly cried with relief. I pulled over behind it, not caring that I was blocking part of the road. I jumped out of my car and ran to the back of my van. Dale had opened the rear doors and was sitting on the bumper talking to Julia, who was wrapped in what looked like an emergency blanket in addition to her own blankets. She was holding a bottle of water, and I could see her medicine bottle next to her. "Dad," she cried when she saw me. I climbed into the van and pulled her into a hug, careful not to jostle her wheelchair. She was crying, and I was crying, and I didn't care that Dale was watching or that snow was blowing into the van. "I've got you, baby. I've got you. You're safe." I was so scared. I didn't know what was happening. Why did they tow the van with me inside? That's a really good question, and someone is going to answer for it. I promise you that. I looked at Dale over Julia's head. "Thank you for taking care of her." Dale looked uncomfortable, his weathered face drawn with concern. "Sir, I feel terrible about this." The HOA lady, she told me this was an abandoned commercial vehicle. She said you'd been warned multiple times and were trying to dodge the tow. She never mentioned a child. If I'd known, I never would have hooked it up. "This isn't your fault. Brenda Patterson knew Julia was in the van." I told her directly, and she threatened to call the cops on me for harassment when I tried to stop you. His expression darkened. "She knew." That lady stood there and watched me tow a van with a kid inside and said nothing. That's exactly what happened. That's not just wrong, that's criminal. I've been doing this job for 20 years and I've never heard of anything like that. Red and blue lights appeared through the snow as 2 police cruisers pulled up. 4 officers got out, and Officer Chen, a young Asian man who barely looked old enough to be out of the academy, approached first. "Mr. Irving, is your daughter okay?" "She's okay now. Scared and upset, but physically okay." He looked at Julia with genuine concern. "Hi there, I'm Officer Chen. You're very brave. I'm going to make sure you get home safe with your dad, okay?" Julia nodded, wiping her eyes. Officer Chen turned to Dale. "Mr. Freeman, I need to get your statement about what happened." While Dale talked to the officers, another officer, an older woman with sergeant stripes, spoke with me. "Mr. Irving, I'm Sergeant Lisa Rodriguez. I need to understand exactly what happened this evening. Start from the beginning." I explained everything, from Brenda's constant harassment to the email warning to her standing there while my van was towed despite me telling her Julia was inside. By the time I finished, Sergeant Rodriguez's expression was grim. Mr. Freeman confirmed that Miss Patterson told him the vehicle was abandoned and made no mention of a child inside. That's a serious problem. At minimum, we're looking at reckless endangerment. Possibly more depending on what the district attorney thinks. "I want to press charges," I said firmly. "Brenda Patterson knowingly allowed my disabled daughter to be towed away in a blizzard. She could have died. If this storm was worse, if Dale hadn't pulled over, if Julia had a medical emergency." "I understand. We'll be speaking with Miss Patterson tonight. For now, let's get you and your daughter home safely. You can't drive your van in this weather, and frankly, your Civic isn't much better. We'll give you both a ride home in our SUV." Getting Julia transferred from the van to the police SUV in the middle of a blizzard on the side of a highway was not an easy task, but the officers helped. They were patient and careful with her wheelchair, making sure she was secure in the back seat. I sat next to her, holding her hand, while Officer Chen drove us back to Meadowbrook Heights with Sergeant Rodriguez following in the other cruiser. The drive back took nearly 45 minutes. The roads were buried under several inches of snow, and even the police SUV struggled in places. Julia dozed against my shoulder, exhausted from the fear and adrenaline. I stayed awake, my mind churning through everything that had happened and what needed to happen next. When we pulled onto my street, I saw lights on in Brenda's house 3 doors down. Sergeant Rodriguez saw me looking. "We'll be talking to her as soon as we get you settled," she said. "Do you need help getting your daughter inside?" "I can manage, thank you. Her manual wheelchair is in the garage." The officers helped me get Julia inside and into her regular wheelchair. She was so tired she could barely keep her eyes open. I got her into her pajamas and into bed, making sure she had her stuffed elephant and her night medication. "Dad," she said sleepily, "are we going to have to move again?" "No, baby, we're not moving. This is our home and nobody is going to make us leave." "I don't like that lady, she's mean." "I know, but you don't have to worry about her anymore. The police are handling it." "Okay, I love you, Dad." "I love you too, sweetheart, more than anything in the world." I stayed with her until she fell asleep, then went back downstairs where Sergeant Rodriguez was waiting in my living room. "How is she?" she asked. "Asleep, finally." "Sergeant, what happens now?" "Officer Chen and another unit are at Miss Patterson's house now taking her statement. Based on what Mr. Freeman told us and what you've told us, we have grounds for arrest on reckless endangerment charges. The district attorney will likely add more charges after reviewing the case. What Miss Patterson did was not just a civil HOA matter. When she knowingly allowed a disabled minor to be removed from her home without parental consent or supervision, in dangerous weather conditions that crossed into criminal territory. Good. I want her prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. I understand. I also recommend you contact a civil attorney. You likely have grounds for a substantial lawsuit against both Miss Patterson personally and the HOA. "Oh, I'm definitely doing that. This woman has been harassing me since the day I moved in. I have documentation of everything. Every petty fine, every threatening email, all of it." Sergeant Rodriguez nodded approvingly. "Keep all of that. The district attorney will want to see it to establish a pattern of harassment. It strengthens the case significantly." My phone buzzed with a text from Dale Freeman. "Your van is secure at my yard. No charge for the tow or storage. I'll deliver it back to your house personally as soon as the road's clear. Again, I'm so sorry about what happened. If you need me to testify or make any statements, I'm available." I showed the text to Sergeant Rodriguez. "He's a good man. He took care of Julia when he realized what happened. We'll need his testimony. What he can confirm about Miss Patterson's statements to him is crucial evidence." We heard voices outside, and through the window, I saw Officer Chen and another officer escorting Brenda out of her house in handcuffs. She was yelling something I couldn't make out, her face red with anger even in the dim light from the street lamps. "Miss Patterson is being arrested on charges of reckless endangerment of a minor and child endangerment," Sergeant Rodriguez said. "Given the severity and the circumstances, the judge is unlikely to be sympathetic during arraignment." Watching Brenda being put into the back of a police car should have felt more satisfying than it did. Mostly, I just felt exhausted and angry that it had come to this at all. None of this should have happened. Julia should have been safe at home watching her show and drinking hot chocolate, not traumatized and towed through a blizzard because a petty tyrant with an HOA clipboard couldn't let a minor parking infraction go. Over the next few days, the story spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. It turned out I wasn't the only person Brenda had been harassing. She'd made enemies of half the community with her ridiculous fines and power trips. People started coming forward with their own stories. The elderly couple 2 streets over who got fined because their grass was a different shade of green than the approved color. The single mom who got a violation notice for parking her work van in her own driveway overnight because she was a plumber, and apparently that was too blue-collar for Brenda's vision of the neighborhood. The veteran with PTSD who got reported for having his emotional support dog outside without a leash, even though his yard was fenced and the dog never left the property. A petition started circulating to remove the entire HOA board. News stations picked up the story. HOA president arrested after towing van with disabled child inside during blizzard made headlines across the state and then nationally. My phone didn't stop ringing with reporters wanting interviews. I declined most of them. I gave one statement to the local news explaining what happened and asking for privacy for Julia, who was still processing the trauma of that night. She'd been having nightmares about being towed away, waking up crying and asking where she was. I took her to see her therapist, Monica, who specialized in working with kids with disabilities. Monica was wonderful with Julia, helping her work through the fear and confusion. She also recommended I get Julia into counseling specifically for the trauma of what happened. What that woman did was a form of kidnapping, Monica told me after one session. Julia was forcibly removed from a safe location without her consent or yours. That's going to have psychological effects beyond the immediate fear. She was right. Julia became anxious whenever I left her alone for even a few minutes. She didn't want to sit in the van anymore, even parked in the garage. The place that had been her safe, fun space was now associated with fear and abandonment. The legal process moved faster than I expected. Brenda's arraignment happened 3 days after her arrest. The judge set bail at $50,000, which apparently she had trouble making. She spent 4 days in jail before her husband, a quiet accountant named Robert who I'd seen around the neighborhood, posted bail. The HOA tried to distance itself from Brenda's actions. The other board members put out a statement saying she had acted outside her authority and without consulting the board. They suspended her from all HOA duties pending the outcome of the criminal case. I hired an attorney named Marcus Thornton, a sharp guy in his early 40s who specialized in civil rights cases and HOA disputes. He'd heard about the case on the news and reached out to me directly. "Mr. Irving, what happened to your daughter is one of the most egregious HOA abuse cases I've seen in my career," he said during our first meeting at his downtown office. "And I've seen some bad ones, but this crossed the line from civil dispute into criminal endangerment. We have an excellent case. I want Brenda Patterson held accountable. I also want to make sure the HOA can't do this to anyone else. We'll pursue both. I'm recommending we sue Miss Patterson personally for the intentional infliction of emotional distress on both you and Julia, along with reckless endangerment. We'll also sue the HOA as an organization for negligent supervision and failure to properly train their board members. The HOA's insurance will likely settle once they see the evidence. What kind of timeline are we looking at? The criminal case will move faster. That's scheduled for trial in about 4 months unless she takes a plea deal. The civil case could take a year or more, but I expect the HOA to settle within 6 months once discovery gets underway and they realize how bad this looks. Marcus was right about the criminal case moving quickly. The district attorney assigned to the case, a tough woman named Patricia Owen, took it personally. She had a special needs son herself and was appalled by what Brenda had done. I met with Patricia several times as she built her case. She was thorough, collecting not just the evidence from that night, but also the pattern of harassment Brenda had directed at me and others in the neighborhood. I'm charging her with reckless endangerment of a minor, child endangerment, and false imprisonment, Patricia told me. The false imprisonment charge might be harder to prove, but given that she knowingly allowed your daughter to be removed from your property without consent and transported against her will, I think we have grounds. What kind of sentence are we looking at if she's convicted? Each charge carries different penalties. Reckless endangerment is a Class 3 misdemeanor in Colorado, usually up to 6 months in jail and a fine. But child endangerment is a Class 1 misdemeanor or a Class 6 felony, depending on the circumstances. Given that Julia has a disability and was placed in a dangerous situation during a blizzard, I'm pursuing the felony charge. That carries 2 to 5 years in prison. The thought of Brenda in prison for 5 years should have made me feel vindicated, but instead, I just felt sad about the whole situation. This could have all been avoided if she'd just been a reasonable human being. If she'd knocked on my door and said, "Hey, I know you're new, but the van can't stay in the driveway," I would have moved it. If she'd shown even an ounce of compassion or flexibility, none of this would have happened. But she hadn't. She'd chosen to wield her tiny amount of power like a weapon, and now she was facing serious criminal charges because of it. The preliminary hearing was set for mid-February. Marcus advised me to attend to show the judge how serious I was about pursuing justice. So I arranged for Julia to stay with my ex-wife Linda for the day. Linda and I had a complicated relationship. The divorce had been messy, mostly over her inability to handle the demands of raising a child with special needs. She'd wanted to institutionalize Julia, put her in a care facility so we could have our lives back. I'd refused, and that had been the beginning of the end of our marriage. But Linda did love Julia in her own way, and she'd been horrified when she heard about what happened. She drove up from Denver the night after the incident and had been making more of an effort to be present for Julia since then. "Are you sure you're okay testifying?" Linda asked me the morning of the hearing. "This is going to be all over the news again. I'm testifying if Patricia needs me to. Brenda needs to face consequences." I agree. What she did was unforgivable. I just worry about Julia. This has been so hard on her. The therapist says the best thing for Julia is seeing that people who do wrong face consequences. It helps her feel safe again. Linda nodded. "Keep me updated. And Zach, I'm sorry I wasn't more supportive when we were together. You were right about Julia. She's better with you in a home, having as normal a life as possible." It was the closest Linda had come to acknowledging her mistakes, and I appreciated it. "Thanks. That means a lot." The courthouse was packed. Apparently, the case had attracted a lot of attention, and the gallery was full of reporters and community members. I saw several of my neighbors there, including the elderly couple and the single mom plumber. They'd all been subpoenaed to testify about Brenda's pattern of harassment. Brenda sat at the defense table with her attorney, a slick-looking guy in an expensive suit named Gerald Fleming. She looked smaller than I remembered, her hair pulled back severely, wearing a conservative navy suit that I assumed her lawyer had picked out to make her look sympathetic. She didn't look at me once. The hearing itself was technical and brief. Patricia laid out the charges and the evidence. Dale Freeman testified about what Brenda had told him and how she'd failed to mention Julia's presence. Officer Chen testified about arriving at the scene and my frantic state. Sergeant Rodriguez testified about taking my statement and Brenda's lack of remorse when they arrested her. Gerald tried to argue that Brenda had no way of knowing Julia was in the van, that it was an unfortunate miscommunication in a stressful situation. But Dale's testimony destroyed that defense. "She was standing right there when Mr. Irving ran out yelling that his daughter was in the van," Dale said firmly. "I heard him. She heard him. She told me to continue the tow anyway and said he was lying, That's when I should have stopped, but I trusted her as the HOA representative. That's my mistake, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. Patricia also entered the email Brenda had sent me into evidence, the one where she'd given me 15 minutes to move the van during a blizzard. The judge, an older man named Thomas Reeves, read it with obvious displeasure. "Miss Patterson, did you send this email?" Judge Reeves asked. Brenda's lawyer whispered to her, and she nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. And you sent it during a Level 3 blizzard warning when the city was advising all residents to stay off the roads." "The HOA rules don't have weather exceptions," Brenda said, her voice defiant. Judge Reeves looked at her over his glasses. "The HOA rules also don't supersede basic human decency or child safety laws, Miss Patterson. The charges will proceed to trial. Bail conditions remain the same. You are prohibited from contacting Mr. Irving or his daughter, and you are prohibited from any HOA activities. Next court date is April 15th. We're adjourned." The trial date came faster than expected. Gerald Fleming tried to negotiate a plea deal, offering to plead guilty to the misdemeanor charges if Patricia dropped the felony. Patricia refused. "This woman endangered a disabled child during a blizzard," Patricia told me when we discussed the plea offer. "I'm not letting her walk away with a slap on the wrist. We're going to trial." The trial lasted 3 days. The prosecution's case was strong. Dale Freeman testified again, more confident this time. Officer Chen and Sergeant Rodriguez provided detailed accounts of that night. Patricia entered dozens of emails and violation notices into evidence showing Brenda's pattern of targeting me specifically. Then I testified. Walking to the stand was nerve-wracking. The courtroom was packed again, and I could feel everyone's eyes on me. Patricia led me through the events of that day, from Julia's canceled therapy appointment to making hot chocolate to realizing Julia was being towed away. "Mr. Irving, when you told Miss Patterson that your daughter was in the van, what did she say?" Patricia asked. "She told me I should have thought about that before violating HOA regulations. When I tried to stop the tow truck, she grabbed my arm and threatened to call the police on me for assault and harassment." "And what did you do?" "I ran to the tow truck driver and told him Julia was inside. He didn't hear me at first because of the storm. Brenda told him I was lying, then they drove away with my daughter." "What went through your mind in that moment?" My voice cracked. "Terror, pure terror. My daughter is disabled. She can't get out of her wheelchair without help. She needs medication at specific times. She was alone with a stranger in a blizzard, and I had no idea where she was or if she was okay. I thought I might never see her again." Patricia nodded gently. "Thank you, Mr. Irving. No further questions." Gerald's cross-examination tried to paint me as a difficult neighbor who refused to follow reasonable rules. He pointed out the multiple violation notices I'd received, suggesting I'd been antagonistic toward Brenda. "Isn't it true, Mr. Irving, that you received over 15 violation notices in your first 3 months living in Meadowbrook Heights?" "Yes, but every single one was for minor things. Grass a 1/4 inch too long, trash cans out early, a Christmas wreath that wasn't pre-approved." Meanwhile, other neighbors had the same issues and weren't cited. Brenda was targeting me specifically. "That's speculation. It's documented fact. Miss Peterson from 2 streets over had her trash cans out a full day early every single week. She never got a citation. The Jenkins family had non-approved holiday decorations up for months. No citation. I have photographs and testimony from multiple neighbors." Gerald changed tactics. "Why was your daughter in the van alone?" "She wasn't alone initially. I was making her hot chocolate and planning to join her. She likes watching shows in the van. It's something we do together. I was gone for less than 5 minutes when Brenda authorized the tow. But you left a disabled child unsupervised in a vehicle. I felt anger flash through me. I left my daughter in a van parked in my own driveway for 5 minutes while I went inside my house to make her a snack. That's not negligence. That's parenting. What is negligence is knowing a child is in a vehicle and authorizing it to be towed anyway. The judge intervened. "Mr. Fleming, I suggest you move on." Julia didn't have to testify, thank God. Patricia had fought to keep her out of the courtroom, arguing that making her relive the trauma served no purpose when we had plenty of other evidence. The judge agreed. The defense's case was weak. Brenda testified, trying to claim she thought I was lying about Julia being in the van. But Dale's testimony had already demolished that defense. He'd been clear that he heard me yelling about my daughter, and that Brenda had told him to continue anyway. Gerald called character witnesses, who testified that Brenda was a dedicated HOA president who cared about the community. But Patricia's cross-examination brought out that several of these witnesses had been fined by Brenda themselves and were afraid of retaliation if they didn't testify on her behalf. In closing arguments, Patricia was devastating. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is very simple. Brenda Patterson knew that a 12-year-old disabled child was in the van she authorized to be towed. She knew it. Multiple witnesses heard the child's father tell her, and she chose to let that tow proceed anyway. Why? Because enforcing an HOA parking rule was more important to her than a child's safety. Because her need for control and power outweighed basic human decency. Julia Irving has cerebral palsy. She uses a wheelchair. She needs medication at specific times. She was alone, frightened, and being towed through a blizzard by a stranger while her father desperately tried to find her. She could have been injured. She could have had a medical emergency with no one there to help her. She could have died if the tow truck had slid off the road in those terrible conditions. Brenda Patterson gambled with a child's life over a parking violation. That's not an HOA dispute. That's criminal endangerment, and it demands accountability. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. When they returned, I was sitting in the gallery with Marcus beside me. My hands were shaking. On the count of reckless endangerment of a minor, how do you find guilty? On the count of child endangerment, how do you find guilty? On the count of false imprisonment, how do you find guilty? Brenda's face went white. Her husband, sitting in the row behind her, put his head in his hands. I felt relief wash over me so intensely I almost couldn't breathe. Sentencing was set for 3 weeks later. Patricia told me she'd be recommending the maximum sentence given the severity and Brenda's complete lack of remorse throughout the trial. She never once apologized, Patricia said. She never acknowledged that what she did was wrong. She showed no empathy for Julia's trauma. Defendants who show remorse often get more lenient sentences, but Brenda showed none. The civil case against the HOA was proceeding separately. Once the criminal conviction came down, the HOA's insurance company immediately reached out to Marcus about settling. "They know they're going to lose," Marcus told me. "The criminal conviction proves Brenda's actions were egregious, and the HOA is liable for the actions of their board president. They're offering $250,000 to settle." Is that a good offer? It's a starting point. I think we can get more, especially considering Julia's ongoing therapy costs and the trauma she suffered. I'm going to counter at $500,000. The negotiations went back and forth for 2 weeks. We finally settled at $400,000. Part of the settlement required the HOA to completely overhaul their bylaws and rules, implement training for board members on disability rights and fair enforcement, and establish an appeals process for violations. Marcus also insisted on including a provision that all of my previous violation fines be refunded, and that I couldn't be targeted for enforcement for any reason related to Julia's disability needs. "This is a good settlement," Marcus said. "The money will help with Julia's ongoing care and therapy. The policy changes will protect other residents from going through what you went through." The money was nice, but what mattered more was knowing that other families wouldn't face Brenda's harassment. The HOA board completely turned over. All of Brenda's allies resigned, and new elections were held. The new board president was the single mom plumber, a woman named Rachel Martinez, who'd suffered her own abuse from Brenda. "First thing we're doing is making sure the rules make sense and are enforced fairly," Rachel told me after she was elected. "No more power trips. No more targeting people for petty reasons. This is supposed to be a community, not a dictatorship." Sentencing day arrived in late April. The courtroom was less packed than during the trial, but still well attended. I was there with Marcus. Linda had driven up from Denver again to be there with me, which I appreciated. Judge Reeves read through the pre-sentencing report, which detailed Brenda's actions and the impact on Julia. Patricia had submitted letters from Julia's therapist documenting the ongoing trauma. I'd also written a victim impact statement that the judge read. "Miss Patterson, do you have anything to say before I impose sentence?" Judge Reeves asked. Brenda stood. She looked like she'd aged 10 years since her arrest. "Your Honor, I never intended for any child to be harmed. I was doing my job as HOA president, enforcing the rules that all residents agreed to follow. I made a mistake in judgment, but I'm not a criminal. I've served this community for 8 years as a volunteer. I don't deserve to go to prison for this." Judge Reeves looked at her for a long moment. "Miss Patterson, I've presided over this court for 23 years. I've seen a lot of defendants stand where you're standing. Some show genuine remorse and take responsibility for their actions. Others, like you, refuse to acknowledge the severity of what they've done. You didn't make a mistake in judgment. You made a conscious choice to prioritize an HOA parking rule over the safety of a disabled child. Multiple people told you that child was in the van, and you chose to ignore them. You threatened the child's father when he tried to stop you. You showed no remorse when arrested during trial or even now at sentencing. Julia Irving is 12 years old. She has cerebral palsy. Because of your actions, she was forcibly removed from her home, transported against her will through a dangerous blizzard, and traumatized to the point where she still requires therapy months later. You are fortunate that nothing worse happened, that the tow truck driver had the sense to pull over and contact authorities when he discovered Julia in the van. This court takes crimes against children seriously, particularly when those children are vulnerable due to disability. The jury found you guilty of 3 serious charges. I agree with their verdict completely. On the charge of reckless endangerment, I sentence you to 6 months in jail. On the charge of child endangerment, I sentence you to 3 years in prison. On the charge of false imprisonment, I sentence you to 1 year in jail. These sentences will run consecutively for a total of 4.5 years. You will serve at least 85% of this sentence before being eligible for parole. You will also pay restitution to the Irving family for therapy costs and damages in the amount of $50,000, separate from the civil settlement. You are permanently banned from serving on any HOA board or in any position of authority over residential communities. I hope you use your time in prison to reflect on how your need for control and power led you to endanger a child. Court is adjourned. 4.5 years. Brenda's husband started crying. Her lawyer looked stunned. Brenda herself just stood there, seemingly unable to process what had happened. I felt a complex mix of emotions: relief that she was being held accountable, sadness that it had come to this, anger that Julia had to go through this trauma at all, but mostly I felt like justice had been served. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed me. I gave a brief statement thanking the district attorney, the jury, and Judge Reeves for taking Julia's safety seriously and holding Brenda accountable. I declined to answer specific questions, saying I wanted to focus on helping Julia heal and moving forward with our lives. The story made national news again. Former HOA president sentenced to 4.5 years for endangering disabled child ran on major news sites. Legal experts debated whether the sentence was too harsh or appropriate given the circumstances. HOA reform advocates used the case as an example of why HOAs needed better oversight and accountability. I tried to ignore most of it. Julia was what mattered, not the media circus. Julia's recovery was slow but steady. With therapy, she gradually became less anxious about being alone. We created new routines and new safe spaces that weren't associated with the trauma. She started sleeping through the night again without nightmares. Monica, her therapist, said Julia was remarkably resilient. Kids with disabilities often develop strong coping mechanisms because they have to navigate a world that isn't always built for them. Julia is using those same mechanisms to process this trauma. She's going to be okay. The settlement money went into a trust fund for Julia's future care and education, with a portion set aside for ongoing therapy. I also used some of it to properly renovate the garage so the van could fit comfortably without being surrounded by boxes, and I added a finished space where Julia and I could watch shows together in comfort. We never did watch shows in the van again. That space was too connected to the trauma. But Julia was okay with the new setup, and we started a new tradition of Friday night movie marathons in the garage hangout space. The neighborhood changed after everything that happened. The new HOA board was reasonable and fair. Rachel ran it like an actual community organization rather than a fiefdom. Violation notices became rare and were only issued for genuine problems, not petty nonsense. The community felt friendlier, with neighbors actually talking to each other instead of everyone being afraid of the HOA police. Several families reached out to me with their own stories of HOA abuse from Brenda. I listened to all of them, and Marcus helped several people pursue their own claims against the old HOA board. A pattern emerged of Brenda targeting anyone she perceived as not fitting her vision of the perfect neighborhood: minorities, single parents, people with disabilities, anyone who was different. In June, about 4 months after sentencing, I received a letter forwarded through the district attorney's office. It was from Brenda, written from the women's correctional facility where she was serving her sentence. I almost didn't open it. I didn't want to read some self-serving justification for her actions, but curiosity won out. The letter was surprisingly brief. Mr. Irving, I've had a lot of time to think about what I did. I was wrong. I endangered your daughter because I was more concerned with rules and control than with being a decent human being. I've replayed that day hundreds of times, wishing I could go back and make different choices. I can't change what happened, but I want you to know that I'm sorry. I'm genuinely, truly sorry for the pain I caused Julia and you. I hope she's recovering and that you can both move forward. I don't expect forgiveness, and I'm not asking for it. I just wanted you to know that I finally understand the severity of what I did. Brenda Patterson. I read it 3 times, looking for signs of manipulation or insincerity. But it seemed genuine. People could change, even people like Brenda. Prison had apparently given her the perspective she'd lacked before. I showed it to Linda, who'd become a more regular presence in Julia's life since the incident. "What do you think?" I asked. "I think she's finally taking responsibility. Whether it's genuine remorse or just what she thinks she's supposed to say, I don't know. Does it matter? I guess not. Julia's healing regardless of whether Brenda feels bad about it. Are you going to respond?" "No. There's nothing I need to say to her. This chapter is closed." I filed the letter away with all the other documents from the case and didn't think about it again. Life gradually returned to normal, or as normal as it gets. Julia finished 6th grade with good grades despite missing several weeks of school during the worst of the trauma. She got accepted into a special summer program at the university for kids interested in science, which thrilled her. She wanted to be a marine biologist when she grew up, specializing in helping injured dolphins. I had no doubt she'd accomplish whatever she set her mind to. The van, the source of all the trouble, got a new paint job. Julia helped pick the color, a cheerful blue that she said reminded her of the ocean. We had it detailed inside and out, trying to make it feel like a fresh start. It was just a vehicle again, not a symbol of trauma. On the 1-year anniversary of that terrible day in January, I was worried about how Julia would handle it. But she surprised me. "Dad, can we have a celebration?" she asked at breakfast. "A celebration?" "Yeah. 1 year ago was really scary, but I'm okay now. I got through it. And that mean lady is in prison where she can't hurt anyone else. That seems like something to celebrate." I looked at my amazing, resilient daughter and felt my eyes water. "You're absolutely right. What kind of celebration do you want? Can we have a party?" "Invite Monica and Officer Chen and that tow truck driver who was nice to me. And maybe we could donate some of the trust fund money to help other kids with disabilities. Turn something bad into something good. I think that's a wonderful idea, sweetheart." We held the party at a local community center. It was small, just close friends and the people who'd helped during the crisis. Dale Freeman brought his granddaughter, who was about Julia's age, and the two girls hit it off immediately, talking about their favorite TV shows. Officer Chen came with his wife and young son. Monica brought her therapy dog, a gentle golden retriever that Julia loved. During the party, I made a donation of $25,000 to a Colorado organization that provided support services for families with disabled children. Julia helped me present the check, giving a little speech about how scared she'd been but how many people had helped her. "Bad things happen sometimes," Julia said to the small group. "But there are a lot more good people than bad people, and we can choose to be good people who help others." There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Looking back on everything that happened, I learned some important lessons. I learned that sometimes you have to fight for what's right, even when it's difficult and expensive and exhausting. I learned that my daughter is stronger and braver than I ever gave her credit for. I learned that most people are fundamentally good, like Dale, who stopped to help, and Officer Chen, who was so gentle with Julia, and the neighbors who came forward to support us. I also learned that unchecked power, even something as small as an HOA presidency, can bring out the worst in people. Brenda wasn't evil. She was just a person who got a tiny bit of authority and let it corrupt her judgment to the point where she endangered a child. The case set precedents in Colorado for HOA accountability. Several bills were introduced in the state legislature to reform HOA regulations and provide better protections for homeowners. One bill, dubbed Julia's Law by its sponsors, required HOA board members to undergo training on disability rights and fair housing laws. It passed unanimously. Julia's story also inspired other families dealing with HOA harassment to come forward. A support group formed for people fighting unreasonable HOA rules, with Marcus providing pro bono legal advice to families who couldn't afford attorneys. The group grew to over 200 members within 6 months. As for us, we stayed in Meadowbrook Heights. It was our home, and we weren't going to let Brenda's actions drive us out. The community embraced us. Julia made friends in the neighborhood. I got to know our neighbors beyond just awkward waves across lawns. It became the community it should have been all along. Julia thrived. She started middle school in the fall with confidence. Her physical therapy continued to show progress. The nightmares stopped completely. She talked about the incident matter of factly when it came up, without the fear and trembling that had characterized her early recounting. "It's part of my story now," she told her therapist during one session that I sat in on. "Something scary happened, but I survived it. It doesn't define me, but it did make me stronger." Monica smiled at that. "You're absolutely right, Julia. You took a traumatic experience and processed it in a healthy way. That's incredibly mature." By the time summer rolled around again, 18 months after the incident, Julia was doing so well that her therapist reduced their sessions to once a month. We marked the occasion by taking a week-long trip to San Diego, where Julia got to visit the marine biology center she'd been dreaming about. Watching her face light up as she learned about dolphin rehabilitation made every struggle worth it. One evening during that trip, as we sat on the beach watching the sunset, Julia turned to me. "Dad, are you glad we moved to Colorado, even after everything that happened?" "Yeah, because we also made good friends and the new HOA is nice and you don't have to drive as far to work." "So overall it was good, right?" I pulled her close, careful not to upset her wheelchair on the sand. "Yeah, sweetheart. Overall it was good. We got through the hard part together and we came out stronger." "That's what I think too." We sat there watching the waves roll in, the California sun painting the sky in oranges and purples. My daughter was happy and healthy and healing. Justice had been served. Our community had reformed. Life was good. Brenda Patterson was in prison, facing the consequences of her actions. The HOA system that had enabled her abuse had been reformed. Other families were protected from similar harassment. And most importantly, Julia was thriving despite the trauma she'd endured. Sometimes I still think about that terrible day, standing in the snow watching my van disappear with my daughter inside. The helplessness, the terror, the rage at Brenda's callousness, but those memories are balanced now by the aftermath. The community support, the legal victory, Julia's resilience. The positive changes that came from speaking out. If I could go back and prevent the whole thing from happening, of course I would. No parent wants their child to suffer. But since I can't change the past, I choose to focus on how we responded to it. We didn't let it break us. We fought back. We won. And we used our experience to help others. That's all anyone can do when faced with injustice. Fight back, speak up, demand accountability, protect the vulnerable, and never, ever let petty tyrants with clipboards decide that rules matter more than human lives. Julia's law passed the state Senate in the spring of the following year. I was invited to attend the signing ceremony when the governor made it official. Julia came with me, wearing her favorite blue dress and the medal she'd received from the Disability Rights Organization for her advocacy work. "This law will protect countless families across Colorado from the kind of abuse the Irving family suffered," the governor said during her remarks. "It ensures that HOA board members understand their responsibilities, not just to enforce rules, but to serve their communities with compassion and common sense." "Julia, would you like to say anything?" Julia wheeled up to the microphone, and I saw her take a deep breath. Public speaking still made her nervous, but she'd been working on it with her speech therapist. Thank you, Governor. What happened to me was really scary, but a lot of people helped make it better. This law will help make sure other kids don't have to go through what I did. HOAs should make neighborhoods better, not scarier. I hope this law helps them remember that. The room erupted in applause. The governor bent down and handed Julia the signing pen as a keepsake. Photos were taken. It made the front page of the Denver Post the next day. Julia Irving, 13, inspires HOA reform law, my daughter the advocate, my daughter the survivor, my daughter the inspiration. Life continued to move forward. I got a promotion at work, partially because my boss was impressed by how I'd handled everything. You showed real strength and character fighting for your daughter, he told me. That's the kind of person we want in leadership here. Linda and I managed to build a better co-parenting relationship. She still had her limitations when it came to Julia's care needs, but she made more effort to be present and supportive. Julia spent some weekends with her in Denver, and Linda made sure her condo was fully accessible. I'm trying to do better, Linda told me during one kid exchange. I'll never be the parent you are to her, but I can be better than I was. That's all anyone can ask. Julia deserves to have both her parents in her life. The neighborhood continued to improve under the new HOA leadership. Rachel Martinez proved to be an excellent president, fair and reasonable while still maintaining community standards. She created committees for different aspects of neighborhood management and actually listened to resident input. Shocking concept, I know. The revenge parking ordinances that Brenda had passed were repealed. The approved decoration list was expanded to include basically anything that wasn't obscene or dangerous. Fines were reduced and only levied after multiple warnings for genuine problems. The HOA went from being the neighborhood police to actually serving the community. I even joined the Architectural Review Committee, helping to make decisions about home modifications. My experience with Julia's needs gave me insight into accessibility issues that other committee members hadn't considered. We approved ramps, widened doorways, and other modifications without the excessive red tape that would have existed under Brenda's regime. This is what an HOA should be, Rachel said during one board meeting. Helping neighbors, solving problems, building community, not playing gotcha with violation notices. Brenda served 3 years and 9 months of her sentence before being paroled. Her release made the local news, and a reporter called asking if I wanted to comment. I declined. She'd served her time. What she did with her life now was her business, as long as it didn't involve any position of power over others. I did hear through the neighborhood grapevine that she and her husband had divorced, and she'd moved to Arizona. Good. A fresh start away from the community she'd terrorized was probably best for everyone. Julia graduated from middle school with honors. She was accepted into a specialized high school program for students interested in marine sciences. She continued to excel in her physical therapy, gaining more mobility and independence. She started talking about college plans, looking at universities with strong marine biology programs and good accessibility. UC San Diego has an amazing program, she told me one evening while researching schools. And their campus is really accessible. Plus, I could be near the ocean. California is pretty far from Colorado, I know. But I can't let being far from home stop me from following my dreams, right? You taught me that. She was right. I had taught her that. By fighting back against Brenda, by refusing to be cowed by unjust rules, by demanding accountability, I'd shown Julia that you don't back down from pursuing what's right just because it's hard. You're absolutely right. If you see San Diego is where you want to go, then we'll make it happen. Her smile could have lit up the whole house. Looking at Julia now, confident and driven and happy, it's hard to remember the scared 12-year-old being towed away in a blizzard. That girl still exists in her somewhere, the memory of that trauma part of her history. But it doesn't define her. She's so much more than what happened to her. She's an advocate who speaks at disability rights events. She's a student who excels in challenging courses. She's a friend who makes people laugh. She's a daughter who makes me proud every single day. She's Julia Irving, and she's going to change the world. As for me, I learned that being a parent sometimes means fighting battles you never expected to fight. It means standing up to petty tyrants and corrupt systems. It means endless therapy sessions and legal meetings and media interviews. It means channeling fear and anger into productive action. But mostly it means being there for your kid, no matter what. It means making hot chocolate and watching bad TV shows and celebrating small victories. It means creating safe spaces and new traditions. It means showing them that bad things can happen, but good people will fight to make things right. That night in January, when Brenda Patterson authorized my van to be towed with Julia inside, was the worst night of my life. But the days and months and years that followed showed me the best of humanity. The tow truck driver who stopped when he realized what was happening. The police officers who took it seriously. The district attorney who prosecuted vigorously. The jury who held Brenda accountable. The community that rallied around us. The legislators who passed laws to prevent future abuse. For every Brenda Patterson wielding power carelessly, there are hundreds of people ready to fight for what's right. That's the lesson I take from all of this. That's the lesson I've taught Julia. And that's the story of how an HOA president's obsession with parking rules led to criminal charges, prison time, legal reform, and a family that emerged stronger than before. It's a story I never wanted to live through. But now that we're on the other side, I'm grateful for the lessons learned and the growth that came from adversity. Julia is thriving. Justice was served. And Meadowbrook Heights is a better community for everyone. Sometimes the worst experiences lead to the most important changes. This was one of those times. And I'll spend the rest of my life making sure that Julia's story and the reforms it inspired continue to protect vulnerable families from abuse by those in power. That's the end of our HOA nightmare. But it's also the beginning of Julia's future as an advocate and changemaker. And that makes all the struggle worthwhile.